In April 1970, Bruce Lee gave his famous demonstrations on 2 Hong Kong TV shows that led to him getting signed to make movies with Golden Harvest Studios. But what nobody talks about is what happened when Bruce Lee fought a Goju Ryu Karate Master while he was in Hong Kong on that trip. This is an absolutely true story that every Bruce Lee fan is gonna love hearing. There were a lot of stars in the Kung Fu movie industry in the 70s, but only a small number of them were actually real martial artists who actually taught students and ran schools. 2 of the most known were Bruce Lee and Lee Jun-Kun. Bruce Lee completely changed the Hong Kong movie industry, and he created the gold standard for martial arts movies with Enter the Dragon. It was because of Bruce Lee that the studios began to seek out guys who were real martial artists, like Lee Jun-Kun, to become the new martial arts stars after Bruce Lee passed. Lee Jun-Kun was a skilled martial artist whose films were known for fast-paced action and exciting fight scenes. He was popular during his run, and he managed to attract fans around the world. Now, although Lee Jun-Kun had the same last name as Bruce Lee, he was never propped up as a Bruce Lee pretender, even though he did appear in at least one Bruceploitation film, and this was probably due to some rumors that Bruce Lee and Lee Jun-Kun trained together at some point. Hearing that the 2 of them may have trained together, who do you think would win in a sparring match between Bruce Lee and Lee Jun-Kun? Let's see how the 2 of them compare in a head-to-head matchup. Bruce Lee is the patron saint of Kung Fu, and 50 years after his death, it's become increasingly more difficult to separate the myths and legends from the real stories about him. But what isn't a myth or a legend is that he successfully bridged the gap between East and West by bringing the Chinese martial arts to everyone's attention. Bruce Lee was a product of both the East and the West, in that he was born in a Chinatown hospital in San Francisco while his father Li Hoi Chin was touring the US with a Chinese opera troupe. At 3 months old, his parents returned to Hong Kong, where he entered the movie business at a very young age. It was also around that time that a young Bruce Lee first started his martial arts training in the art of Tai Chi Chuan. An unfortunate incident in a playground fight would quickly bring Bruce's fascination with Tai Chi to an end, but he would start learning the art of Hung Kuen secretly from his father's friends, who were actors in the popular Wong Fei-hung movies that were being made when Bruce Lee was a child. But unfortunately, another fight that didn't work out in Bruce's favor would end his Hung Kuen studies and cause Bruce to seek out a Wing Chun master, Master Yip Man, to officially begin his formal study of Kung Fu. When Lee turned 18, he returned to the United States to sign up for the Selective Service so that he would not lose his US citizenship. He moved to Seattle, where his first friends became his practice partners. It was at this time that Bruce began to adapt his Wing Chun and also began to experiment with other Kung Fu styles and eventually other styles of martial arts besides the Chinese styles. Eventually, Bruce reached the decision to create his own personal expression of the ideas he was testing, which became Jeet Kune Do. It was while sharing these ideas, which were considered pretty revolutionary at the time, that Bruce was discovered by a Hollywood producer. Bruce's decision to focus on movies as the preferred method to present Jeet Kune Do to the world would result in Bruce returning to Hong Kong to star in 3 Foot and Fist films before landing Enter the Dragon, which would make him one of the biggest movie stars in the world after he passed, in what many would consider to be the prime of his career. Like Bruce Lee, Lee Jun-Kun also grew up in Hong Kong in the early 1950s. Unfortunately, there isn't much information available about his background other than his martial arts training and his film career. It is believed that Lee began training in Goju Ryu Karate at a young age, and he quickly became a skilled martial artist. Goju Ryu Karate is a traditional Okinawan style of karate that is characterized by a combination of hard and soft techniques. The name Goju Ryu literally means hard, soft style. Chojin Miyagi is generally considered to be the founder of Goju Ryu, and it is a style influenced by a number of martial arts, including Chinese Kempo, Kung Fu, and Okinawan Tae. Lee Jun-Kun's reputation as a skilled Goju Ryu teacher eventually earned him a role in martial arts films, and he made his film debut in the early 1970s by going by his English name, Larry Lee Gam Kwan. Some of his most known films were Bruce Lee in New Guinea, Thunder Kick, 10 Tigers of Shaolin, Bloody Ring, and The Chinese Tiger. Lee Jun-Kun, or Larry Lee's films, were known for their fast-paced action and exciting fighting scenes. He became a popular actor in Hong Kong, and old-school martial arts movie fans around the world still love his movies. Lee Jun-Kun made about 10 movies before he retired from acting around 1981, but he returned in the mid-90s to appear in 2 more films before hanging it up for good. And it is unknown why Larry Lee retired from acting. Some people close to him say that he retired to focus on his family and his business interests. Others said that he was unhappy with the direction that the Hong Kong film industry was headed in the early 80s. Lee Jun-Kun has always been a private person who rarely gave interviews, and he doesn't have a social media presence. In one of his rare interviews, he did say that he was impressed with Bruce Lee's skills and that he learned a lot from him. He also said that Bruce was a very humble and generous person. And this led some to speculate that Larry Lee and Bruce Lee possibly spent some time training together, but no one really knew for sure. And there's a good reason for why people were speculating that Larry Lee and Bruce Lee may have trained together, and it was because of Bruce Lee's appearance on 2 Hong Kong talk shows, Enjoy Yourself Tonight and Golden Hour. In April 1970, Bruce appeared on both talk shows where he gave some martial arts demonstrations, and Larry Lee's students were Bruce's assistants. Those interviews were actually a really big deal because it's what led to Raymond Chow signing Bruce Lee to the 2-picture movie deal that turned into The Big Boss and Fist of Fury, 2 movies that would completely shatter the box office and make Bruce Lee the biggest movie star in Hong Kong 2 years after those TV interviews. Now, I talked about all of this in a previous video, but what I didn't talk about was how Bruce Lee managed to get Lee Jun-Kun, or Larry Lee Gam Kwan's students, to participate in his demonstration. Well, as it turns out, Bruce Lee and Larry Lee actually did meet and cross hands with each other at Bruce Lee's cousin's house while Bruce was on that Hong Kong visit. As the story goes, word got out about Bruce Lee visiting Hong Kong, and the TV stations RTV and TVB both wanted to interview Bruce Lee on their talk shows. Bruce saw it as an opportunity to demonstrate Jeet Kune Do on every television in Hong Kong, and to possibly stir up some interest with the movie studios in Hong Kong, especially Shaw's Brothers Studios. I think it was Bruce's friend Yu Ming who got Bruce in touch with Ching Kwang Min, a Hong Kong comedian who also happened to be a member of the Okinawan Goju Ryu Karate Do Kukagai, about supplying some martial artists for Bruce's television demonstration. Chang spoke with Larry Lee Gam Kwan, who ran that Goju Ryu school, and the meeting was going to happen at Yu Ming's house. And I should add that Yu Ming was married to Bruce's cousin. That's how they knew each other. Now, at the time of the meeting, Larry Lee had just been promoted to 3rd degree black belt in Goju Ryu, and he ran a school out in the New Territories that had a lot of triad activity in the neighborhood. Now, just some background, something that a lot of people may not know is that at this time in Hong Kong, it was actually illegal for Kung Fu schools to do a lot of sparring. In competitions between schools, that was absolutely illegal because it was believed that all of these Kung Fu schools had ties to triads. This is the reason why there were Beimo matches on the rooftops of buildings or in hotel rooms. But that wasn't the case for karate schools. They could spar, they could have tournaments, they could go visit other schools for the sake of comparing their stuff against the other school students. And this was one reason why you'll see some Kung Fu guys that took up karate, like Wong Sheng Lung and Hawkins Chung, in the case of respected Wing Chun teachers who are also known to have earned black belts in karate. So I'm just saying this to let you know, this Larry Lee guy, he wasn't one of these guys who was doing a lot of forms or katas and learning gymnastics. He was mixing it up pretty regularly. Now, Larry Lee said that when they met, he was really intrigued by Bruce's skills and he wanted to test himself against Bruce. Before they started training, he was feeling pretty confident about the whole thing. And as I just said about the location of his school, Larry said he often had to deal with gangsters and hoodlums from the neighborhood coming to his school to challenge him. He also said that he really didn't know much about Bruce before they started, and he said he had no idea Bruce's martial arts skills were actually legit. So what actually happened? Well, at first they started to compare their punching power on some pads, but then they both agreed to go out onto the balcony to spar. Since there was such limited space, they agreed to only using hands with no real contact to the head. Yu Ming and Unicorn Chan were also out on the balcony at each end to stop either of them from falling over if things got out of hand. Well, as they started sparring, Larry Lee said it felt like Bruce was able to evade every punch he threw with ease, so he started to throw in some feints, but it still had no impact on Bruce. He still couldn't touch him. Well, then Bruce started to unleash a barrage of controlled punches that were hitting Larry Lee on the left and right shoulder continuously. Larry Lee said that after a while, his upper limbs felt totally dismantled and he had to stop. They shook hands and then proceeded to geek out talking about martial arts. During Bruce's 2-week visit to Hong Kong, he had lunch with Larry Lee and Unicorn Chan several times, and he visited Larry Lee's dojo in the New Territories, where he demonstrated the power of his kicking for Larry Lee's students. Larry Lee said that Bruce's speed was very fast, his power was very focused. When he kicked the air shield, you would hear explosions and Unicorn Chan would be sent flying back as Bruce Lee kicked the air shield. Now, something that's really interesting about all of this is that Lee Jun-Kun and Unicorn Chan both met and trained with Bruce Lee, and they both appeared in Bruceploitation movies with the actor Ho Chung-dao, also known as Bruce Lee. Now, what's even more interesting is Unicorn Chan witnessed this sparring match between Bruce Lee and Larry Lee Gamquan, and it makes me wonder about Unicorn Chan's part in the Bruceploitation movie Bruce Lee, the Man and the Myth, where Unicorn Chan was present at Bruce Lee's secret fight at that mansion against a challenger named Mr. Chan, who was played by Chu Chi Ling, a well-known Hung Gar actor. Of course, this is based on the real event of Bruce Lee's secret fight against a challenger, but it makes me wonder if Unicorn Chan was also present for that real fight. And that's something I plan to discuss in an upcoming video, so for those of you who know exactly what I'm talking about, please don't spoil it in the comments for everybody else. And you know what? We can just laugh at the people saying that Bruce Lee never had a real fight in his life, because he was only an actor. But the cool thing about this story with Bruce Lee and Larry Lee is that it lines up with what Jim Kelly said about Bruce sparring with people and saying hands only, or feet and hands, as well as the part about Bruce pretty much being untouchable. I mean, that's pretty good for somebody who was only an actor, huh? Well, if you want the full story around what happened when Bruce visited Hong Kong in 1970 on that trip, be sure to check out this video that puts everything into context, because after hearing this story, you definitely want to hear about what happened in the TV demos with Larry Lee's students. And if you like hearing about stories about Bruce Lee's real fights, you'll also want to check out this video about another Bruce Lee fight that he didn't want anyone to know about. I have a lot of martial arts movie news to cover besides the upcoming Bruce Lee biopic and the House of Lee series, so I'm going to be busy over the next few weeks in addition to finally getting my new studio and my home gym set up. So while I tackle this workload in front of me, I hope you all keep training, remember to breathe, and come back to see me on the next video.